Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Thomas Van Kampen once again. I'm here with another Let's Animate, but in a different setting. Rather than Toon Boom, you may have noticed that this is actually Photoshop. That's because I am making a more sophisticated background for the part of my demo reel that I'm making. If you watched last episode, you'll know that I was animating a woman walking and then running. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to make a good-looking background, or at least I hope it'll end up being good-looking, and I'm going to integrate it into my animation later. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing right now. I skipped ahead quite a bit. I actually made a lot of progress off camera. I finished all the details and comic book lining for my woman running and stuff like that, and her head is properly proportioned, the neck's no longer weird. And I gotta say, like, I'm not one to tune my own horn most of the time, but it turned out great. It turned out really, really cool looking. It looks not quite what I initially had in mind, but it actually has like this really cool, like, distinct kind of comic bookish inking to it. It looks like that old Spawn animated series, if anybody knows what I'm talking about. I think it aired on like Late Night Fox or something like that. It was a series based on the Todd McFarlane superhero Spawn. So yeah, it looks a bit like that. It also looks a bit like the Watchmen comic book. If anybody has read Watchmen, not like the before Watchmen series, just the original with Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, and yeah, looks a bit like that. So yeah, I think this will end up looking really neat, and I'm excited for this one. Um, I apologize for some of the footage you may see in here if you see my noobish Photoshop skills. Truth is, I don't have much experience with the program. I used it a bit in high school, but that's about it. And even then, I mostly just kept it to just fiddling in funny ways with photos of my friends and making them look weird and stuff with the what do you call that tool? It's like the liquify tool, that's what it's called. Yeah, I basically just fiddled around with that a bunch in high school and just made a bunch of funny images, but I never actually used it to make cool looking animated backgrounds. But that's what I'm going to be doing here. I hope it'll turn out okay. If it doesn't, I might just resort to making the background in what do you call it? Toon Boom instead, and I'll just compile it in a way that because I was able to make it look really good in Toon Boom, like the woman's shading and her line work and stuff like that, I might just do that again if this doesn't work out. But for now, I'm going to give this a try because I know Photoshop is used pretty frequently in animation for making backgrounds and stuff, or at the very least, Harry Partridges uses it. I think OneyNG, or Chris O'Neill, I think he uses Photoshop tool. I know he made a background tutorial series, where he used something like Manga Studio or something like that. But, yeah, maybe he uses Photoshop. I don't know. Point being, this is what I'm doing. So, yeah, that's pretty well it in terms of my current project. I think in a previous episode, I was talking about things like comedic inspirations. I was saying something like, I apologize for any of the background noise. I get messaged on Facebook and I get texts a lot. So, yeah, I'll deal with that when I can, but, I'm going to stick to this. I mentioned in one episode that I wanted to talk about my comedic inspirations, but the recorded footage for that episode ended up being lost. So I might just do that again, and in place of that episode, I just decided to talk about that controversial topic instead. If you wanted to, I'm not going to address it here in the name of good taste, but if you wanted to see what I had to say about said controversial topic, you can go ahead and check out that video. But anyway, comedic inspirations. Let's make this a lighthearted one. I take comedy pretty seriously in my life, and there's a big reason for that. For those of you who are unaware, I have Asperger's syndrome, which is commonly characterized as a high functioning autism. And yeah, it has some symptoms of autism. It's got like autistic like qualities, and it is on the spectrum, but it's often seen as not quite as severe as traditional autism, I guess, where it's mainly just social awkwardness, really deep interest in certain things. I'm subject to sometimes to what's called sensory overload, where I just take in way too much information at once, either audible or visual. Most of the time it's audible, though. I tend to have really sensitive hearing. So yeah, but there's a reason why have a bit more of a communicative edge than most autistic people do. Like a lot of them are huge shut-ins, unfortunately, and it's such a tragic thing because even though they are at a disadvantage, it is possible to combat. And I know that because I come from a family of 10. I'm the youngest of 10 children, and pretty much everyone in my family is very charismatic. They're very passionate. They're very good at communicating and stuff like that. So like a couple of my brothers are musicians. My sister's a photographer. My brother works at Yellow Pages. So they tend to work in jobs where communication is important. And that's where I picked up a lot of my mannerisms, and that's where I picked up like the kind of idea where it's okay to be a little bit weird, because I'm gonna be right up front. My family's a bunch of nut jobs. Like, we're so weird. We have such a strange sense of humor. So yeah, and that's kind of where my sense of humor comes from. But yeah, not only that, but I actually owe a lot of my communicative what do you call them, advantages to drama class. I took drama throughout 6 years of my life, all throughout junior high and all throughout high school. And it really helped me on the communication edge because it was an environment that told me that it was okay to be weird and it was okay to have these big, wild ideas. And I was encouraged to have them. And maybe other people's experience in drum class is different. Maybe they unfortunately didn't get something that luxurious, and maybe they were just a shut-in. Maybe they just took drama as a blow-off class. Admittedly, I took drama in junior high back when I didn't really understand what it was. I just saw drama class in in my options that I could select, and I was like, drama? What exactly is that? And I took it just because I didn't know what else to take. And I don't regret that decision. It ended up being really good for me. So, yeah, I'm proud of that. Yeah, so, and that's a big reason why I take comedy very seriously, is that something that really raised my confidence over the years is the ability to make people laugh. As a kid, I didn't really understand what made people laugh. I didn't laugh at all the jokes that everybody else laughed at. To me, it just didn't click very much. And I also I also often made people laugh when I didn't mean to, when I was saying something totally sincerely and non-ironically, people would start laughing at me, and it made me sad a little bit because I didn't understand why. And so I kind of committed to being like, all right, I have no idea how this works. I want it to figure out how it works, because the few times where I made somebody laugh and it was on purpose were some of the fondest moments I have in my life, because it just happens so rarely in the beginning. So I was like, I really want to figure this stuff out, and I really want to figure out like how comedy works so that I can better apply it and I can better utilize it for my life. And one of the books I read, it's a terrific book. It's called The Humor Code. And I unfortunately, as I'm recording this, do not remember who wrote it. Maybe I'll look that up as I'm doing this. I think I have time, yeah. I'll just look up who wrote The Humor Code real quick. But essentially, what the humor code is it is a nonfiction book about a journalist and a psychologist who travel around the world to discover what makes people laugh, and like how, and they go into subjects like, when does humor go too far, when does it get offensive, and they look into stuff like, can humor be found in the most desolate and miserable of places? Can humor how does humor translate between cultures and stuff like that? It's super, super interesting. Okay, so the book was written by Joel Warner, who I believe is the journalist who writes it, and Peter McGraw, who I believe is the psychologist. My apologies if I got that mixed up. But yeah, if you're any fan of comedy, I definitely would check it out. They go to all sorts of places. They go to Japan to figure out how humor is different there. They go to Palestine to see if any humor can be found in a place that's filled with so much misery. They go to the Amazon to help out on Hunter Adams' clown medical organization. That's a terrible way of describing it, but still. They go to Denmark to talk about the controversial Muslim cartoons that showed up in a newspaper. Yeah, they talk about all sorts of things, and it's super interesting. Another thing that I highly recommend, and again, I don't know the name of this guy. I should know the name of this guy if I'm going to through so much trouble to look them up, to talk about them. But I'm gonna look it up right now so that I can link you guys to it. But this guy made a really cool documentary called "That's Not Funny," where he talks about offensiveness and humor, and how comedy should have no restraints. And he gives his own examples throughout history. He explores the history of comedy, and he pays one giant tribute to it. So I'm going to go to this. My computer's being a bit slow. I'm going to go to this right now and figure out what this guy's name is. I'm going to turn down the audio so it doesn't pick up too much. Man, this podcast is just jumping all over the place really quickly. I hope I'm not overrunning the time. If I am, I'll just put in extra footage. Yeah, I think I'm fine. Let's see. Let's figure out what this guy's name is. Okay, so the director and narrator is Mike Celestino, and I apologize if I mispronounced that, but I'll put a link in the description to his documentary about comedy. It's so interesting. I put it on all the time whenever I'm animating or something like that. It's one of the things that I put on in the background whenever I just need white noise and stuff like that. But yeah. Funny enough, this podcast, Let's Animate, or whatever you want to call it, this was ideally supposed to be about my comedic inspirations and what I think my brand of humor deviates from, but unfortunately I haven't talked much about that. I'm still belating all this stuff, but yeah, like, point being, comedy's a huge part of my life, and I think comedy's a huge part of everyone's life, because, come on, who doesn't want to make people laugh? Like, who doesn't want to laugh at really funny jokes? Like, without laughter, where would we be? I think Joan Rivers was saying that about 9/11. She was talking about the importance of being comfortable with joking about whatever it is you need to joke about. And she was talking about how badly the events of 9/11 affected America. And she was just like, after 9/11, where would we be if we didn't laugh? And that's an important thing. a lot of people, and this is includes a few people in my family, they think that there's like boundaries of what you can joke about, and I think that's the major reason why they couldn't be comedians, because if they were, they would limit themselves so much to the possibilities. And it's important to develop a sense of it's important to develop a sense of humor that's not within a bubble, you know? It's important to be able to look at everything objectively and to be able to laugh at everything. Because a lot of people see humor in a lot of situations as something that's sort of degrading to the seriousness of the situation. So people say you can't joke about rape, you can't joke about race, you can't joke about sex, you can't joke about double standards in society when it comes to gender. You can't joke about serious diseases that people are plagued by. But the thing is that humor helps us cope with the sadness in our life. Like, it helps us enjoy life regardless of its problems, because our problems are exactly what humor comes from. If we didn't laugh at these things, then our life would just be way more depressing than it currently is. So, yeah, anyway, I think that's all the time I'll use up. Thank you guys so much for joining me on another episode of Let's Animate. Hopefully I'll stay more on topic next time, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Okay, see you later.